Nothing on the Bunnell Foundation's Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bunnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast, sponsored by Vertex Pharmaceutical. Here's your host, Laura Bunnell.
Cystic fibrosis wasn't on the radar for Lily and husband John, but when their fifth child, Bonnie, was born and diagnosed, they quickly learned all they could about cystic fibrosis. It was a long road to diagnosis because of the serious health risks and concerns that Lily was facing prior to any sort of CF diagnosis. This podcast is dropping on Bonnie's second birthday, and let's get her story from her parents. Thanks for joining us, Lily. Appreciate it. And glad that we got connected. You went on our website. You shared your inspirational story with us, and that's how we met. I read it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to this woman. Your fifth child was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and you had no idea at that time that you were carriers. But thank you so much for joining us today. You have a lot to share.
Thank you.
For this CF community. So, and it's so wonderful to get to share everybody's different CF story. I mean, it is clearly our story. So thanks for sharing. Why don't you kind of start at the beginning?
We had our fourth child, and my spouse and I just decided that, we wanted to have a surgery to prevent further pregnancies during that C-section. And that was May of 2018. And so we went in, and during my C-section, we had what is called a tubal ligation, which is like getting your tubes tied just to prevent further pregnancies. And, shortly after then, we bought a home that had a lot of acres, and we began to add, livestock and animals and just kind of enjoying a simple country life. And oftentimes I would carry these big 50-pound feed bags to my barn because I just thought it built like endurance and strength. It was fun to walk up there with it, see how far I can get. And I mentioned that because it kind of ties into my story. Mm-hmm. And so, I started to feel like unwell. I can't really put my finger on it, what it was. It was just more abdomen. It was just kind of like discomfort, pain. And I made an appointment with my OBGYN. And during that time, that was January 2019, I remember him saying that my uterus was enlarged. So I didn't know what exactly that meant. And he kind of stopped and he looked at me and he said, that means your body is carrying a baby. And when somebody gets something that is kind of permanent, like a tubal ligation, the last thing on your mind is pregnancy. It's just not something you think about, especially I had just had that surgery 8 months prior, and that was something that I did not expect, and I did not believe him. I did not. No, he's, a doctor for many years. He knows his stuff. Of course, he knows. But I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't feel pregnant. I don't think I'm pregnant. And he said, yeah, I do. So we had blood work done that day to confirm the pregnancies in my blood levels. And he had ordered an emergency ultrasound because he wanted to make sure that the baby was okay since I was halfway through a pregnancy.
Wow. You must have really been in shock. I mean.
Yes, that's the absolute last thing on my mind. I thought everything could have been going on before pregnancy. And I have 4 children prior. And a lot of people had asked me this question of, how do you not know that you're pregnant? Well, I stay hydrated. I drink water. I'm tired because I have 4 kids and a whole mini farm, so that's just the absolute last thing you think about. It was a very shocking. My blood work came back that same day. He called me personally and said, you are in fact pregnant.
Wow. And was John with you? Your husband, John, was he with you at the time?
No, he was not. I was at my appointment. I came home. He had gotten into a car accident recently around that time. So he was off of work, just recovering. And of course, when you need to talk to someone, it's like my phone was not wanting to charge in the car. I'm trying to get my phone, to go. I'm trying to call him. My call keeps dropping because we had just bought this house. And at first there was like no internet. So I could not connect with him. I'm so frustrated. I'm driving home and I burst through the door and he's like, what's the matter? And I'm like, I couldn't even get it out of to tell him what was going on. And so I had stopped at a nearby pharmacy store and I picked up a little digital pregnancy test. And I was that sure that my doctor made a mistake. I'm like, no, I'm going to take this test and I'm going to prove that he's incorrect. And so I go to my restroom and I'm doing my test, and I put my pregnancy test down, and my husband walks in. It's on the sink. He's like, "What's going on?" And he looks down, and he's just like, "What?" His face. And right when he said that, the pregnancy test popped up pregnant, and he just laughed. And the more he laughed, the more I cried. I was like, there's no way. And he just was like, huh, okay. He took it just, okay, well, and I'm just like, my doctor said, and I don't believe him, so yeah, that's kind of how that went.
Oh my gosh, what a surprise.
Yes.
And that was just the beginning. So you're surprised with baby number 5.
Yes.
Once you get over the shock, of course you're excited.
Yes.
And then what happens? Then what comes next?
Well, then after that, we had the ultrasound done. And during the ultrasound, I had something going on. And I had a placenta previa at the time. That is when your placenta grows over the top of the cervix. I had to go to a specialist just to make sure that they were keeping an eye on my placenta. It did not correct itself. Instead, it became a placenta accreta. And that just means when the placenta is still growing over the cervix, and now it's pierced through your uterine wall. And that's when it gets very, very dangerous. My placenta pierced through my uterine wall, and it grew on top of my bladder. So it was piercing through my vital organs. And I was going to a specialist far away from where I live. And I remember every time we went to our ultrasound, it just kept getting worse and worse. It was progressing more and more. This last ultrasound, the doctor walked in himself and he said, look, I'm looking at this and I don't like what I'm seeing. He was a very serious tone. That's when I took what he was saying seriously, because I felt that, he was also afraid for me. He said, look, you live, again, I live on a little farm, a very rural area. So I'm about 25 minutes from the nearest hospital. And from that hospital to my specialist, I'm over an hour. And he said, you're just way too far out in the country for me to feel comfortable to allow you to go home. He said a placenta accreta is very dangerous and you can die from this. So I'm going to need you to go home. Mm-hmm. And I want you to pack a bag and come here. You're going to be hospitalized. And when he said that, I was so upset that I remember, I began to cry and I said, I have 4 kids at home. I can't. And he said, right. And I want you to return to your kids. I don't want you having to pass away from this, because that's exactly what can happen if we're not ready and prepared for you.
Mm-hmm. And then you are going to the hospital, correct?
I'm hospitalized. Thank God I have such a big family from my husband that I inherited. His mom and dad took my older kids, and they were in school at the time. So they were able to take them to school. And I have a very dear sister-in-law, and she took my 2 little ones, so thank you to them for that. That was just, it lifted so much weight off of my shoulders. So I get hospitalized and, I'm just getting ultrasounds and, making sure everything's okay. Bonnie began to, she wasn't really moving anymore at one point. And they were wanting to keep me there. That was the plan, to keep me there, to get as close to delivery as possible so that I can just have a smooth sailing, just a planned delivery, let her get as big as possible. Mm-hmm. And then they can go in. Because at this point, I would need a surgeon for the placenta removal. I would need a surgeon for my hysterectomy. I would need a surgeon to take off the roots that had grown through my on my uterine, that pierced through my uterine wall, grew on top of my bladder. So I needed a whole lot of surgeons for that. So they wanted to make sure that that was a planned delivery and not a surprise. She stopped moving, and I had a test done and they did a stress test, and Bonnie was not using her diaphragm on both tests, which meant they felt like, what could cause her to stop using her diaphragm? No movement at that point. So on her birthday, we had no idea, that was going to be her birthday. The doctors always rounded very early in the morning, and they all came into my room and said, look, this is the plan. We want to now do a more in-depth ultrasound with other doctors present that can detect any kind of issues that might be going on with Bonnie, what's going on, that she's not using her diaphragm. And I said, okay. My husband had just pulled into the garage parking lot of the hospital and said, look, I'm going to be there in 5 minutes. I'm going to park my car, go to the elevators, go to your room, and then we can go to the ultrasound. They said, that's perfectly fine. Grab a nurse. When he's here, we're going to be on the floor rounding. So once he's here, we'll take you straight into that ultrasound and we can figure out what's going on. And something came over me. I've never had this feeling before in my life. There's like a little voice in my head that said, you should go sit down. And I'm thinking, that's really strange. And I go to the bathroom thinking, maybe I'm getting jittery. Maybe I'm nervous. I sit down. And when I sit down, I feel my water break. I've had my water break before, so I knew exactly what it felt like and sounded like. I thought, oh man. And I said, okay. I had kind of like gathered myself and said, okay, just calm down, just with all calmness, call a nurse. Maybe we can figure this out. Doesn't mean she's going to be born today. I'm talking to myself, and I said, okay, I'm ready. And when I went to try to lift my head up, I had absolutely no energy. I could not even move my own self. And I thought, this is strange. And I opened my eyes and I just see so much blood. And it was a very dark color, which made me feel that it was internal. And I thought, oh no, they were right. This is a lot of blood. It was just gushing. I've never seen that much blood in my life. And it was very frightening. I began to lose consciousness. Things began to slow down. And I had enough sense, thank God, to pull the emergency cord in my bathroom, because I was getting ready to collapse. I felt it. And I was trying to break my fall, holding my pregnant stomach. And I remember just falling forward, and I just blacked out. Unfortunately, my husband walked in, and after everything was said and done, he said, wow, the whole floor was lit up. The color was going off. The entire floor, everything, it was chaotic. I could see so many doctors running to the corner. And he said, I wonder what's going on. And he said, as I kept walking closer and closer, I thought, oh no, I think this is my wife's room. And he said it was an organized chaos. They had it under control. But he said, I walked in and there was a pool of blood. You were covered in blood, your pants, everything. You were soaked in blood. And you were laying there, and they were trying to either resuscitate you or just try to help you out of, you've collapsed. I don't remember any of that. I just remember collapsing. That was it, And what I do remember after that, I woke up in the operating room. There was this bright light in my face, and I thought, where am I? How did we get here? I just kept seeing doctors just running in through a door, washing hands, just throwing on. So I knew it was like, I think we're getting ready to go into delivery. I think I absolutely collapsed. And this doctor walked up to me, and he pulled his mask down. He looked at me and he said, you collapsed. We're getting ready to go into surgery. We're going to do everything we can to safely deliver your daughter. And we're going to do everything we can to save you, but you are losing so much blood. And he said, in the case that we cannot stop this bleeding, I need you to tell me that you understand that I'm reading you your rights right now. And I think that was the first time that I've ever been that afraid, that I thought that I was going to die. And I said, yes, I understand. I said a quick little prayer. I didn't care who was there, who saw me. Right. I just called out to God, and I said, I have 4 children, 5 now, that need me. In that moment, I kept thinking to myself, this is it. This is the way I might die. This is how my life ends. And that was a very scary realization. Thankfully, I made it out of that surgery. I woke up, and I was my eyesight was kind of foggy, and I was kind of like, what's going on? And my mother-in-law was by my side, and my husband was too. And she was wearing all white. And I thought, oh man, I think this is an angel. And my husband had a beard. really long beard. And I thought, oh my gosh, Jesus does have a beard. I'm in heaven. And then when I kind of, I'm like, oh, it's my mother-in-law, it's my husband. I was still happy. I was really happy to be there.
I bet you were.
And then,
wow.
Yes. And then, so I had a doctor pretty much explain to me that there's something kind of off with your daughter. I believe it's called like an expansion of the stomach. Like her stomach looked bloated. And he said, I think the best thing to do is take her to Children's Hospital. That thankfully there was a nearby Children's Hospital, not even that 5 minutes away from the hospital. And I said, okay. I told my husband, please go with her, because I can recover on my own here. You just go with her and make sure, daddy's there by her side. And I asked the nurse, I said, is there any way I can see her before you guys take her? Because I don't know how long I'm going to be here. I just had her hysterectomy, placenta removal, bladder. I didn't know how long they'd keep me there, to recover. So I get in a wheelchair and I'm in so much pain, but it doesn't matter. I have so much adrenaline going through me as well. They let me see her, and she's in a little incubator, and I can see her, and she was so small.
Yeah.
She was 3 pounds, and she was 3 weeks premature. So she was so tiny. And I just, said a little prayer over her, and I remember saying, I don't know what's going to happen once they take her. I don't know. They took her, and, I go back to my hospital room and trying to cheer myself up. I made it. I'm alive.
Which is fantastic. Now, our audience can't see, but I think that's a photo of your husband over your shoulder of a Marine picture of him. Can he join us now and take us from the point of when he goes to the hospital with Bonnie?
Yes.
Hi, John. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. How are you?
Great. So take us from that point, from you're leaving your wife, you're going with your daughter, and take us on the rest of that journey until she is diagnosed.
One thing I want to touch, I know my wife misspoke, that Bonnie was actually 10 weeks premature.
Yes, 10 weeks.
They had her down in the NICU at Miami Valley where she was born, and that's what they was looking, and it was just like, they said we think the best options to get her to Children's. So it was basically just a mad sprint to try to get there before or when the ambulance did. So we get her all checked in, which they got her in there and they got her all set up, and they're going over all of these things, what's going on. They're like, we got to figure out what's causing her stomach issues. So it was for the next 3 days, it seemed like it was almost just a nonstop test.
Newborn screening, CF was part of that. Did the results come from the newborn screening?
No, neither one of us knew we were even carriers, because the mutation that my wife has is extremely rare. It's only found in Hispanics, and then even then it's extremely rare. So she had all of her screenings, and it never showed up. And I never had a reason to be tested because it was never anything, known in our families. So then they done the newborn screening with Bonnie. That it did show up because my mutation was rare, or is one of the most common. But at the time, with everything else going on, I don't even know at the time if they had even done the newborn screening with her. Because I think just the way everything happened, they hadn't even got to that yet. Because they was just trying to figure out what was going on, causing her stomach to be just so big. I mean, you could just see every vein in her stomach, and and like I said, it was just a nonstop. It's like, we're going to do ultrasounds, we're going to do X-rays, we're going to do MRIs, and none of that worked. And sorry. They said the only thing we can do is she's got to go to surgery. We've got to open her up, and we've got to figure out what it is, because nothing else is showing us anything. So, at that point, so I'm calling my wife, and she's basically telling the nurse, she's like, I don't care, let me out. And she was like, she's going into surgery. I got to be there. I don't even remember how long Bonnie was in surgery, but felt like a lifetime. Just trying to find an answer, figure out what was going on. After she come out of surgery, they informed us, it was like she had a pretty big blockage. The surgeon said he had to remove a third of her small intestine, and they wasn't able to reattach everything at the time because they wasn't sure how much more maybe wouldn't make it, and they would maybe have to remove more. So they wanted to let it try and heal as best as possible before they reattached.
So how long does it take them now to diagnose her with cystic fibrosis?
Once they had done the surgery and they found out that it was a blockage, that's when they began to suspect it was cystic fibrosis. And that's when they kind of turned around. They was like, okay, well, this is what we're thinking it is, because everything's fitting. And I think at that point, they finally got the newborn screening stuff back. And it was like, well, this is showing up. The blockage fits with cystic fibrosis. So they said, now we're going to, kind of look into it and see if that's, and there's like, normally, we do a sweat test. Well, she was too little to do a sweat test.
Right.
And it was like, genetic testing takes, a couple weeks to get results back.
And then you had neither one of you, like my husband and I, had no knowledge of having cystic fibrosis in your family, right?
Right.
I mean, as it turned out, we're Ashkenazi Jewish and Irish Catholic, some of the most common groups that actually get cystic fibrosis. So what is your ethnicity, race, all of that? Was it a surprise? How did that go?
Yeah. Well, my wife is Hispanic. She's half Mexican and half Nicaraguan. And I'm white. My roots go back from England and Scotland. But yeah, there was never anything known. Come to find out, my older sister is also a carrier. And she only found out because one of her kids is a carrier, and it showed up on the newborn screening. But, she never even, not really knowing what it was. And she was like, well, I never thought to even mention it to anybody because I didn't realize it was something that was the rest of the family could have.
And then Lily, your other kids don't have it, correct?
I have one son that's a carrier. When we spoke to a genetics counselor and they said, I think it's good to test everybody. Let's see, and I agreed to that test. That was very important. And it came to find out my second child carries my gene that's very rare. And so that's all, just one carrier and one with CF.
And how has she changed your life? Tell me how she's brought life into your family.
Well, I think around that time when we started speaking to a genetics counselor and finally a doctor began to explain to us, because I've never heard the word cystic fibrosis. I've never heard of CF. And when we got there and we were able to speak to a doctor and he said the word cystic fibrosis, I was like, what is that? And he began to explain to me what it was. He said, there's no cure, but there's, we can manage it. There's things to treat it. And ultimately, sometimes, children pass away or adults pass away from the disease. It felt like the entire room was spinning. My stomach I was going to throw up my lunch. It just, when you hear that your child has a chronic illness, it feels like your whole world is ending. It felt, I hate to say this, but it felt like they just kind of handed me a death sentence for my child. Here's this newborn child full of life, brand new newborn, hooked up to machines in the NICU, couldn't find an answer what was going on with her. And you're talking to me about life expectancies. And I always say this, my mind, my head, I understand what you're saying, but my heart as a mother does not accept what you're telling me. I did not accept it. I was in denial. I did not accept what he said. I did not. I wanted him to stop talking. I felt like I was going to faint because you just kind of ended my life. I felt like you you took something from, you're telling me that my child has a chronic illness that we're going to manage, but there's no cure. So she'll always be sick. And it was a very hard thing for me in the beginning to accept. I didn't like talking about CF. I hated the word. I just would go into the NICU, take care of my daughter. I didn't want to talk about that. But as she got bigger and bigger, started giving her enzymes, started giving her, it was the strangest thing to have a baby and a little bit of applesauce and a teaspoon and some little enzymes and feed this, it's like she's supposed to be drinking from a bottle. She's not supposed to have, food.
And isn't that something?
Yeah.
I think all of us moms and dads can relate to that. It's that applesauce with the enzymes that we've all done.
Yes.
And I think it's also when your kids are born, both my daughters have CF, but when they're born, it's the vision you had in your head of what their life was going to be.
Yes.
For me, it was like, oh, we'll have like cucumber little sandwiches and we're going to eat so healthy and everything's going to be great. And, and then we're going to do all these things. And then initially, like that first day when you're told the diagnosis, you're like, wait a minute, that wasn't in my plan. That's not what I was thinking. Now you're telling me this kid's going to need like sticks of butter in all their food and they're going to need a high calorie diet and along with everything else. But
once that doctor left, it was silence. All you could just hear is the beeping of the machines. It was just like, okay. Of course, I had to just cry. I was going through so much already myself. There's a lot of pain myself. And I was like, oh, it was hard. But I see this baby and I said, I know what they're saying, but I just made a promise to her. I said, I'm going to do everything I can. I want to celebrate you, love you every day that you choose to wake up and breathe and you choose to everything. It doesn't matter. I don't care what they said. I don't care that they told me that there's a life expectancy. You weren't even supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be born. I had no idea I was carrying you. I had a tubal ligation. I'm not supposed to be pregnant. I could have, if I had not, gone to my OBGYN sooner and they found out what was going on, I could have died here in my home, not knowing that I was pregnant if I began to bleed. And that's why I mentioned the 50-pound feed bags because, they told me don't lift anything beyond 10 pounds. That's so bad for a placenta accreta.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, I'm lifting 50-pound feed bags, so just the odds, I know what they're saying and I understand what they're saying. But at that moment, I said, we're going to celebrate you. She changed my life because everything became so meaningful. I began to look at life so different.
I mean, and don't you see her as a gift? And don't worry, we can hear some of your kids in the background. It is okay. I mean, you do have five children, so
Yes.
It's very hard to keep them quiet.
Yes.
But I mean, don't you see her as a gift?
Yeah, I see life differently because of her. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think some people think it's very weird to hear that, but I think cystic fibrosis is for sure a gift.
Yes.
I mean, we wouldn't want our kids to have it, but what a gift, what a outlook on life we have that is so different from people who just, don't have the same experience.
Yeah, every relationship in my life I cherish. Because, you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. You don't, look at her story and everything she's gone through. I look at life differently. I wake up in the morning, I see her and she's just full of life. She's just a beautiful little girl. She's happy. It just changes everything, your dynamic of thinking, appreciating life a lot better. And, she just got her vest. So she's doing her, airway clearance through with her vest. And it was really exciting. Our whole family was excited.
I was going to say, how do the rest of the kids interact? What do they think about it?
They love it. It was funny because her little brother was like holding the tubes. I think he thought she was going to take off when that machine began to start and her vest began to inflate. He was holding on to her. He thought she's going to take off or lift off or something. We were all excited for her. All of my children, I think, have gravitated to this disease. My older son, he loves school. He's such a smart boy. He's 11. And his name is Sam. And he said, I might want to be a pulmonologist one day. He's like, I know so much about CF already, I might have a head start, so that was wonderful to hear that, it affected him enough to say, if there are people out there that need a pulmonologist. And that was something that he kind of thought, I wonder if I can do that, Oh, my children just, my little daughter, she's 4. She sometimes calls her enzymes her sprinkles. She says, Bonnie has to have her sprinkles. So it's kind of cute. But yeah, it's a blessing for sure.
And John, how has it impacted your life and changed what you're doing? Because you're out in the workforce and Lily is home with all 5 kids and everything that is.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that, people don't realize how much goes into it, because just having 4 kids was so demanding. And then when you take one that has all the needs that Bonnie has, I said, I don't know how anybody could do it by themselves because, I come home from work and, that's what people's like, well, you're going to go home and relax. Well, no, I'm going to go home and tag my wife out so she can relax for a little bit, because there's, everything she needs and try to watch out and her snacks throughout the day. And, it's so much for one person to try to remember. But one thing that's really amazed me is, like I said, before this, I never heard of cystic fibrosis. And then as soon as it comes out and, probably a dozen people now that have it, that's, within 20, 30 miles of us.
Yeah.
There's a woman that goes to church with my sister and she's a double lung transplant recipient, and she does all kinds of baking and she has her own shop and everything. And it's amazing because, it's you never had a clue, how many people really out there. And they say, and I think we've seen this statistic recently that it was something like only like 120,000 people in the United States have it. And you say, well, that's a lot. Then when you look at how many people, that's, 1,000th of the population or something like that. It's just kind of crazy.
Yeah. 30,000 in the United States, but oh my gosh, and I'm going to get this statistic that's always in my head. It's something like there's 10 million carriers, but 30,000 people that have it. And then 1 in 4 chance with each pregnancy that you could have a child with CF. But you have learned so much in 2 short years. I also want to get what you think, but I've recently been saying since new drugs have come out that correct the underlying condition of CF, if you're going to be born with CF, now's the time. There's so much more hope. There's so many more drugs out and on the market. Do you feel that? Do you feel empowered by some of the scientific research that's out there and medications?
Yeah. A guy I work with, his son's in his 20s, has CF, and he's on the CF modulator. And he said it worked miracles because he's been able to reduce so much of his medication now because things are working the way they're supposed to. And then my half brother on his dad's side, his cousin has CF. She's, I believe, 14. And she was always on like a feeding tube and stuff. She's on CF modulator, been able to remove that. And she's been able to go back to more of a normal life. And I recently was talking to a woman whose niece has CF. And there was this other medicine I can't remember the name of. They said that it's worked wonders for her. So just in, the 2 years where they was talking about this CF modulator, now it's out there, that it's the possibilities are endless on how much it can help, everyone with CF.
So Lily, what else does she bring in? Is Bonnie like super happy and does she seem to have any idea? I mean, she's so young, but Does this hold her back at all?
No, she knows medical personnel, and she knows, like, as soon as we go to the doctor, she knows, I'm going to get a swab test. I don't like swab tests. So, she had a nurse in the beginning when she was released from the NICU that would come and just do weight checks. And every time she came in, it's like, Bonnie knew, and she just, kind of start whining. And, but other than that, no, she's a very happy girl. She loves to run and play. I think she's more advanced than my other children were, like as far as walking, and it could be because there's older kids, so she's kind of watching them and learning from them. But she's just a little, ray of sunshine. She loves pigs. We live on a little farm. She's always trying to get in that pig pen, and I'm like, no,
Well, and isn't it funny? Those enzymes are made from like pig valves.
I think I heard something about that.
Yeah, it depends which enzymes you're on, but yeah, just a little fact there. Yeah.
Yeah, she just, loves to just run around. We have a wagon. If you pull her on the wagon, she loves that. I say an invisible disease because you can't see it.
Absolutely.
If I were to lift her shirt up, then you would say, there's a lot of scars there for a little one. You can't really tell, other than she's very petite, little. So it's not, but yeah, like I said, she has taught me so much about life in just 2 years. I mean, and like I said, we would go to the Ronald McDonald House when she was in the NICU, and just to sleep there at night and get some rest, and then go back and, keep an eye on her and spend some time with her. And so they invited me back, to my husband and I, to do a radiothon, and it's just like a pre-recorded interview. So, I get there, I do that. And then, sound person comes up to me and says, we lost your audio. Can you go live? Like, can you just talk to, and I'm on the radio, and I'm like, okay. And I'm kind of like, oh my goodness, I was like this, I was not prepared. I thought I was going to sit here and just listen to my like pre-recorded taping. And I get there, we have Bonnie, and the cameras start rolling, and Bonnie starts waving. That was the first time she's ever done that. It's like she knew, okay, the cameras are here, time to shine,
Wow.
Then that night it came out in the news, and that segment was there. You can see her in the segment, just, there just with us and us talking about it. And then her story was published by her first birthday in the local newspaper. And I thought, oh, Miss Bonnie, you are, they say you have CF and all this. You are just living life,
And you're raising awareness. How wonderful is that?
Yes. My son, one time he said to me, my oldest son said, I know you don't like talking about CF, Mom, but, they're, CF, gene editing. And he had been looking up all this stuff that there's a lot of, good about CF that we can, so. And when he said that, I said, oh, I think he sees that I don't want to talk about CF. I think he sees that I am in denial about CF, and that's when I became more vocal, and I started having more conversations with them about a lot. They had a lot of questions, and the hospital gave me these books, and it's all age appropriate. One book is like a comic book about CF. It's really neat. One book is more, toddler based, and it's got like a little girl. She says, I'm normal just like everyone else, except that I need to take my enzymes and I need to have breathing treatments. And so with that, all the tools they gave us, and, obviously going back and forth from the hospital, we were able to have conversations with our children about CF and not make it so scary, not make it bad. Just make it, this is just something we're living with now. So before the whole pandemic hit, I think my kids were so used to us not really taking Bonnie or going to do activities with other people, because we wanted to make sure she was staying away from too many strangers. Mm-hmm. So they were just used to it. So when the pandemic hit, it was like, well, this is nothing, we kind of go through this already, And my son said he was shocked at how many people in his class didn't know what CF was. And he was able to explain to other, 10-year-olds at the time what CF was. He said, yeah, I got in front of my class and I told everybody, like, my sister has CF and it's this and it's that, and so I think they can explain to you what it is and what it does, better than most children could.
I think that it takes away the fear, right? It's because they're educated and they understand it. So then they're not so afraid of it.
Yes.
It seems. I also think you're doing an amazing job.
Thank you.
Because you don't have fear that I see in some parents who aren't maybe taking it on as front and center as both of you are. You know what you have to deal with, you're dealing with it, and you're doing a great job, it sounds like, and go, head on with it. What advice would you give to someone, either one of you now, when they maybe find out that their child has cystic fibrosis?
Well, and like I said, when you first find out, usually everything that comes up is all the negative things. They're going to have breathing issues. They're going to have eating issues. They're going to be small. They're not going to physically develop as well. And that was, what they first told Lily. They said, okay, this is what we're thinking. Do not look it up. Do not research it.
Don't Google it.
Come,
that's what they said.
Let us talk to you. Well, you can't tell somebody that and expect them not. And
Right.
And that's, I think, kind of what started off, made it really hard because there was so much uncertainty. And the biggest thing, I think really, is trust the providers, trust the caregivers. Mm-hmm. They know what they're doing. Especially now, it's not as rare as it was. There's a lot of knowledge about it, and don't be afraid to ask, because as soon as it kind of come out that, hey, our daughter has CF, then there was all these people that we end up finding out about, and they're like, hey, there's going to be bad days. There's going to be, not everything's going to be positive, but you got to reach past those and move past those. And you can't let the one setback dictate and make it a bad experience. Because every time you have a bad experience, when you go back and you get those positive doctor's visits, and, she had great gain, her vitamins and nutrient, everything's in the normal range. Her swabs are clean. She doesn't have, bacteria growing, and it makes it that much better when you can, you feel like, we're doing everything right. And, there's going to be days that, things don't go right. But I say, you just can't let that be a big hurdle and a burden for you. You just got to know that, okay, this one didn't go so well. We just got to, buckle down and get the next one.
And Lily, as we're wrapping up, I want to hear what you have to say also, about where you go from here and how you're keeping everything going.
I believe in the beginning, like I said, I was very afraid. I was in denial. I was scared and panicky, just could not sleep. I could not eat. I definitely had a lot of that while she was in the NICU. I went through a lot of really sad days. I was very blue about, a lot of things. How do you go on with, you just heard something like that's, life-threatening, pretty much a chronic illness, My husband, I think, helped me have a positive outlook. My husband's brother was killed overseas, and he had served in the Army. And my husband had gone through a lot of therapy where he was able to just kind of calm me down and talk me through my emotions. It was a big process. I had a lot of just moments that I don't know what to make of. Like I said, I'm thinking, oh man, this is it, the end of everything. And I make it out. And I remember her second surgery, I had, said goodbye, and her doctors had taken her, a team of doctors had taken her back, and I had to stop at the elevator. And I break down crying. We're coming down the elevator, and I told my husband, like, I just, you tell me to pray, you tell me to have a faith-based, mindset. And it was really hard for me. And I said out loud, I don't even think God hears me when I pray, because it just keeps getting worse and worse. I'm tired. I want to go home. I want to see my kids. I don't want to be in a hospital any longer. I want this to be over. Why us? I kept saying that. Why us? So there was a little chapel in the hospital downstairs, and I told my husband, you know what? I want to go in. I just want to say a little prayer just to help me. I walk in, and there's a woman at the podium. The chapel's really small, and she's writing something down, and it's a stranger that just visits the hospital because she has a child that visits the hospital regularly. And she looks up and she says, oh, just a moment. I'm praying for baby Bonnie. And when she said that, the hair on my arms just stood up. I was like, I said, Bonnie? And she said, yeah, the baby that has CF. I'm praying for her. And I'm writing down a note so the other people that visit can pray for her. And I said, I'm her mom. And she just went into surgery. And she just drops what she's doing. She runs over to me and she hugged me. And she said, I read the little notes you write for people to pray for her. And I could not believe that, this is a real story, that you had a tubal and she was born out of a tubal ligation. I can't believe that, you've gone through your own things and now she's here and she's got CF and she's had the bowel obstruction. And in that moment, it made me feel like someone is listening, but I say this, and maybe I'm biased, but there's something about people with CF that is so special. I think every person, they have a story that is amazing. They have overcome so much. They're fighters, they're thrivers, they're survivors. They're just so amazing. It is so choked up because it means so much to me. And I just feel that I'm so inspired by them. And it makes me be a better, caregiver, CF caregiver, because if you can fight, if you can get up and you can't breathe well, you can't gain weight, you're in and out of the hospital, you have all these things going on in your life and you're still alive and you're still thriving, then I can definitely be a better mom. I can be a better CF caregiver. It's just such an inspiration. And I know CF is such a horrible disease, but there's people out there that have CF that are just amazing. So if your kid has CF or you're a part of an amazing community that is very loving, they're very strong, they do not let you fight alone. I've created friendships with other people that are caregivers. I know it's a horrible disease, but these people are so special. And I feel they're all, I don't know if God, shines down on them a little bit extra because they're just amazing. And so if you do have a child with CF, I think if you have a faith-based mindset, if you don't, I understand. But that's what keeps me going and gets me through. And like I said, I look at my daughter, I could have a bad day. I could have a really bad day. And I start putting her vest on, it starts inflating and she starts smiling. She's starting the little phase where she goes, ah, and you could hear her sounds like a little lamb, it's adorable. And I just look at her and I said, how am I complaining? And you have CF and you're the one that's strapped to a little vest and you're the one that's taking enzymes.
Right.
It just makes me a better person in so many ways. And I don't believe this is for nothing. I believe there's a purpose, there's a reason. And I'm just so honored, to be a part of the CF community as a caregiver.
And I agree. I mean, well said, both of you. That is absolutely the truth. We have so much in common as parents, caregivers, and our kids. I agree with you 1,000,000% because I think these kids have just a special motivation and direction and strength. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And thanks for sharing your story with us. I also think you're wonderful at writing and sharing your story, and I'm so glad you do. I'm so glad that you two have each other because you absolutely get this disease and you're doing amazing. And she's only 2 years old.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much for giving us a platform to advocate. I really appreciate that.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, check them out online at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Vertex Pharmaceutical, the science of possibility, and produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts,